Hari Sayopitana Bhagavata Girivaradari Pitana Bhagavata Girivaradari Yashodanandana Bhaja Jananandana Yashodanandana Bhaja Jananandana Imatira Vainata Imatira Vainata Jaya 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 Radha Madhava Kunjavihari Jaruki Jana Giri Varada Yashodanandana Bhaja Jananandana Yashodanandana Bhaja Jananandana Kamali Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada ki easy. Running Srimad Bhagavatam Prabhupada Dikachari Shuddha Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Prabhupada Dikachari Shuddha Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Bhagavatam Ki Go Monday Hari Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 5, Narada Muni Chris by Pujapati Daksha, Text 39. Nanu Bhagavata Nityam Nityam Bhutanugrahakatadaha Te Tvam Sohridagram Vai Te Tvam Varan Vairankaram Avairinam Nanu Bhagavata Nityam Bhutanugrahakatadaha Te Tvam Sohridagram Vai Vairankaram Avairinam Nanu Bhagavata Nityam Bhutanugrahakatadaha Te Tvam Sohridagram Vai Vairankaram Avairinam. Please repeat. You want to do it? You say it so nice. Huh? You say it so nicely. Do you want to say it? I'm struggling with the third verse, with the third line. I'm trying to read it. Okay. That's fine, even if it's not perfect. Nanu Bhagavata Nityam Bhutanugrahakatadaha Vitetvam Sohridagram Vai Vairankaram Avairinam. Anyone online like to repeat?
Nanu Bhagavata Nityam
Nanu Bhagavata Nityam
Bhutanugrahakataraha
Bhutanugrahakatadaha
Pratetvam Sohritagrinam Vai
Vitetvam Sohridagram Vai
Vairankaram Avairinam.
Vairankaram Avairinam.
Nanu Bhagavata Nityam Bhutanugrahakataraha
Bhutanugrahakataraha
Te Tvam Sohridagram Vai
Te Tvam Sohridagram Vai
Vairankaram Avairinam.
Vairankaram Avairinam. Thank you. Anyone else online like to go? Okay. Nanu. Now. Bhagavata. Devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Devotees of the Supreme Personality of God.
Nityam. Eternally. Bhuta Anugraha Kataraha. Very much anxious to bestow benedictions upon the fallen conditioned souls. Rite, accept. Tvam, yourself. Sohridagram, a breaker of friendship. Therefore, not countable among the Bhagavatas, or devotees of the Lord. By, indeed, Vairam Karam, you create enmity. Avairinam, toward persons who are not enemies. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Gita. All devotees of the Lord, but you, are very kind to the conditioned soul and are eager to benefit others. Although you wear the dress of a devotee, you create enmity with people who are not your enemies, or you break friendship and create enmity between friends. Are you not ashamed of posing as a devotee while performing these abominable actions? Purport. Such are the criticisms that must be borne by the servants of Narada Muni in the cyclic succession. Through the Krishna consciousness movement, we are trying to train young people to become devotees and return home back to Godhead by following rigid, regular principles. But our service is appreciated neither in India nor abroad in the Western countries, where we are endeavoring to spread this Krishna consciousness movement. In India, the caste Brahmanas have become enemies of the Krishna consciousness movement because we elevate foreigners who are supposed to be mlechas and yavanas to the position of Brahmanas. We train them in austerities and penances, and recognize them as brahmanas by awarding them sacred threads. Thus, the caste brahmanas of India are very displeased by our activities in the Western world. In the West, also, the parents of the young people who join this movement have also become enemies. We have no business creating enemies, but the process is such that non-devotees will always be inimical toward us. Nevertheless, as stated in the Shastras, a devotee should be both tolerant and merciful. Devotees engaged in preaching should be prepared to be accused by ignorant persons, and yet they must be very merciful to the fallen conditioned souls. If one can execute his duty in the civic succession of Narada Muni, his service will surely be recognized. As the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita, Ya idam paramam kuyam mad bhaktesh abhitasati bhaktim mai param kritva mam evaishyatisham sayaha nachatasman manushyeshu kashchin me priyakritama bhavita nachame tasmad anya priya taro bhuvi. For one who explains the supreme secret to the devotees, devotional service is guaranteed, and at the end he will come back to me. There is no servant in this world more dear to me than he, nor will there ever be one more dear. Let us continue preaching the message of Lord Krishna and not be afraid of enemies. Our only duty is to satisfy the Lord by this preaching, which will be accepted as service by Lord Chaitanya and Lord Krishna. We must sincerely serve the Lord and not be deterred by so-called enemies. In this verse, the word Sohrida Gnam, a breaker of friendship, is used. Because Narada Muni and the members of his civic succession disrupt friendships and family life, they are sometimes accused of being Sohrida Gnam, creators of enmity between relatives. Actually, such devotees are friends of every living entity, Sohridam Sarvabhutanam, but they are misunderstood to be enemies. Preaching can be a difficult, thankless task, but a preacher must follow the orders of the Supreme Lord and be unafraid of materialistic persons. Om Egalatimanda Sirgananda Shlaka Chaksha Anmelitam Yena Tasma Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Rama. So, good morning, devotees. Thanks for coming to Bhagavatam class. Yeah, this whole pastime, I mean, pretty much all the classes I've been listening to or reviewing, and like I said in last class, David Ritz Maharaj, I can't remember if it was a year ago or less than that, was giving a class on these verses of Daksha cursing Narada Muni and just, systematically going through each insult and, picking it apart and analyzing it and how it applies to our lives, as he's expert in doing. So, yeah, I honestly, whenever I read the first line of the translation, all the devotees of the Lord but you are very kind to the conditioned souls and are eager to benefit others. Although you wear the dress of a devotee, you create enmity with people who are not your enemies. I was thinking like that's kind of the reaction, at least I have, or maybe we have whenever a devotee, like a mentor, tells you something that you don't want to hear. Like, oh, like the false ego wells up. It's like all the devotees but you are very kind. And it could be like hard, difficult medicine to swallow. And then in a way, Narada Muni will end up at least tempting to act as the as a Shiksha guru for Prajapati Daksha, because he's like, great, now Prajapati Daksha is in so much distress that he may be more receptive to hearing transcendental knowledge. But anyway, Daksha is not at this point willing to take or see the absolute benefit that Narada Muni is trying to impart both to Daksha and to his sons. So anyway, the whole time we've been going through this pastime, I've been thinking about like what is real compassion, because we can see like Nagari Krishna Prabhu yesterday was talking about how Daksha is presenting that one has to, they have to burn off their karma first so that then they can take to spiritual life or take to renunciation, or let's say take to bhakti. But, immediately whenever Agari said that yesterday, just phrase it like that, I thought of how in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, just surrender unto me. Or another way of saying that is like just a way that I have heard devotees explain it that really resonated more with me is like give up your resistance. Because surrender sounds so, there's so much connotation with that, at least in English. But giving up a resistance is actually like, okay, I know what that feels like. I think that I don't know what surrender feels like, although we're actually surrendering to circumstances all the time. But yeah, give up your resistance. And then Krishna says, I'll take care of everything. I'll take care of your karma. Like, yeah, you don't have to worry about it. Your maintenance, everything. So, yeah, so on the one hand, Daksha is saying, no, I have to be in control of my own purification. And then Narada Muni is through his actions. And then, at some point, I forget what it says later in the pastime, but perhaps through his words as well, he's making the case, they can just take to the renounced order. They don't have to, worry about all the intricacies of Vedic rituals or in maybe our context of so many obligations in order to be able to properly come to the platform of bhakti. So yeah, so anyway, while I've been thinking about this point of compassion, and how, by watering the tree at the root, like we fulfill our obligations to all living entities and actually do the highest welfare work. So I was thinking of the example of Srila Prabhupada, that one could say, and I think even I was hearing Devamrita Maharaj in a lecture talk about how some devotees met Prabhupada's son like years later and they're like, oh my gosh, Prabhupada, like that's your father. That's so amazing. Like, look at what he's done for the world, this and that, spreading Krishna consciousness. And what the son had said at that time responded by saying, yeah, but he left us. So it's like he couldn't see the son because of that, material connection, couldn't accurately see, all the glories of what his father had done to spread so much Krishna consciousness. So on the one hand, it's like, well, somebody could, condemn or criticize somebody like taking sannyas, taking brahmacharya, even just coming to Krishna consciousness in general. Well, that's not very compassionate. You just gave up your, at least to some degree, obligation to society or obligation, like illusory obligation to family, or your old friends, or whatever it might be. Now, I'm not saying that that means you shouldn't have a relationship with them or anything, but like I said, to some degree, it's like maybe your parents are expecting that you're going to go home and eat meat like you used to, and you're going to drink with them, and you're going to live your life in this way. What? I thought you were going to get your PhD. What? Like so many things. I thought you were going to get, you were going to be a doctor and like pay for us for the rest of our lives, or live with us, or whatever it might be. So to some degree, yeah, we whenever we take to Krishna consciousness, we have to give up some of the obligations that we might have had to others in material life. But does that mean that we're not being compassionate? No. Just like in Prabhupada's example, he's being the most compassionate actually, and he was very responsible in his family life, and he gave them, gave Lakshmi to his wife, his children, upon, then taking Vanaprastha and then eventually to the renounced order. So, yeah, this is a great example, Prabhupada's compassion, and it's illustrating, what Narada Muni is also trying to accomplish, that if one has that propensity, that one can, give up these obligations and take to the renounced order responsibly. So but this is like the maybe the footnote to this. In order to actually act with authenticity and integrity in that renunciation, that detachment has to be proportionate to our attachment to Krishna. So so basically if the detachment is not coming about because we're attached to Krishna, it's a bit can be a recipe for disaster, or at the very least won't be a very sustainable program. You know, Falgu Vairagya, that's like artificial renunciation, and we don't want that. So Narada Muni, in the case of both sets of sons, he's not encouraging them to detach artificially. He's not saying, oh, well, you know, sannyas is the head of the social body, so with that ideal, let's just go for it. And meanwhile, they're like, well, they have, you know, 5-year-old children and like this and that and the other. He's already seeing that, okay, they're in a situation where they're executing these austerities. He sees the potential. So he's just kind of like, you know, nurturing the small fire that's already there. And that's what the expert spiritual master does, you know, can see the propensity, the proclivities of the student, and then be able to help guide them in the proper way. Okay, which ashram, which kind of living situation should you live in the temple or in the devotional community? Were you more effective outside, here, there, you know, like that. So yeah, it's a lot of personalism, takes a lot of expert guidance. So I wanted to read, see if I screenshotted it. I wanted to read from the Bhagavatam, because this verse has also been coming to mind so much. The one from it's 11:541 about you know, who or what is a bhakti yogi obligated to? And this is Narada Muni again concluding his teachings to Vasudeva. So Devarshi Bhutataninam Trichinam Na Kinkaranayam Anicharajan Sarvatmanaya Shanam Shanyam Gato Mukundam Parihitikartam. And this verse is, I mean, Prabhupada quotes this verse so much, and it's always stuck with me because I've mentioned in class before. This is like, when would that have been? I guess a couple, maybe 6 months after I had like met devotees or kind of like started to move into the ashram, and then maybe 3 months after I was like, you know, fully practicing, Dave and Rita Maharaj came and stayed in the ashram with us in Philadelphia for like a week. And I very distinctly remember him, you know, I hadn't read this in the Bhagavatam yet. I think I was still probably on the first canto. And he chose this verse just to give classes. And I remember being so struck by that. I mean, I don't remember a lot from that time because it's like the beginning of my bhakti is just, there's some moments of like, oh yeah, I remember that was really nice. But it was such a blur and everything was happening so fast. But this sticks out in my mind because I just got the sense from him at that time, like, yeah, he can see that we're a bunch of practically kids and, you know, Mangalarti and Mohit. And I mean, Mohakarnas are older, but kind of all kids in bhakti. And we're actually like, I mean, at least the others were like giving up so much to be here, all living in one house, men and women, and somehow all keeping it together. And, you know, like even in the case of Mulakarna, she was like, you know, was living in Atlanta and then gave up working and everything and was just like sold everything in her house. She just had what could fit in her car. And then she came up to Philadelphia and she was working in the medical field before. But she, you know, upon meeting devotees, meeting Sikhi Mahidi Prabhu, and just basically like renounced everything, like quit her job. She's like, I'm just going to live in the temple and like dedicate my life to, you know, temple or like preaching devotional service for the rest of my life. And then it was like, I don't know all the ins and outs, but basically they needed an ashram, like a proper house outside of the temple. And so then, yeah, I believe it was Sikhi Mahidi Prabhu asked her, like, can you start working again as a nurse? Which was actually renunciation for her. Like she was like, what? You know, her plan was to just, you know, go on, let me distribute books every day. Like she was totally cool with that. But she took on the sacrifice for years. I mean, so steady. Like, and this is she has, you know, like arthritis and is older. She's probably like 50 now. And just working like 12-hour shifts, waking up at like 2:30 in the morning to chant her rounds at 3, finish her rounds before going to work, get on the train, read Krishna book for like this 45-minute or however hour like train ride, work 12 hours, come back, and then like, you know, go to bed, sometimes have to wake up the next morning also at 3 a.m., do the same thing. Like, nurses' schedules change like that. It was just like incredible. Live in one room. I was her first, or she was my first roommate. Like, just like, so, like, here, this kid's gonna move in with you. And like not even the same culture. The age gap is so big, but she taught me so much. And was so like kind and gentle with me. And imagine if you're coming back from work and you just had such a long day, and then maybe like on the day that she would sleep in, for example, when she didn't have work, I'm like up rustling around and shaking the bunk bed because I'm on the top bunk, getting in and out, and she doesn't sleep well. Like just so much austerity, and I'm like, oh my God, how she has to share the closet with me now, which is only like this big, and I get half and she gets half, and she's living out of all of her stuff is like hanging up, or is in we had like milk crates that we would just like stack. I mean, it was blissful. Like, I'm like, this is like the best time of my life. But just, it's just so amazing. Like, we didn't even have a proper desk. Actually, the room was very small. So she just had this plastic, like, fold out table that's like this big. And on her days off, she would just put out her folding chair, put out her table, she would chant, everything like that, maybe make herself some black rice or some kind of like Malaysian prasadam. And she would sit there and read for extra hours just at her little fold out desk and like taking notes on her computer, like this and that. And I'm like, now that I think about it, I'm like, wow, what a simple, life. I mean, really, she, yeah, sold like everything that she had to do that. So anyway, I wasn't even planning on telling that story, but now that I'm getting into it, I'm like, oh my gosh, the glories of devotees are like endless. That's so, incredible. And yeah, she's still going. She's still
She's
yeah,
still working.
yeah, but anyway, I don't want to like spill the beans on like her whole life, but it's basically she'll do whatever's required, whether it's working or let's set up a preaching center or let's like go on books or let's cook and have a restaurant or like, it's just like she's like fully just surrendered to Krishna. So yeah, anyway, it's just super amazing. So, okay, the point was somehow I got onto Mullakarna. The point was David Raj came and gave lecture on this class. It stuck with, because devotees were giving up so much at that time. I wonder if Kalsuk was even going to school then still, or just had, still full-time service. But yeah, and he knew like, okay, well, we're all young. We do have so much pressure of obligation from family, from society, for sure, from the schools that we're going to, from work, like that. I mean, Mangalarti and Mohit, also a great example. Like, so much pressure is there from the family, or like, they're both like, well, she at least corporate executive before, like one of the top people at Capital One, gave that up, sold their like bougie, apartment in like a high rise in Toronto. And now they're living with a bunch of kids in a duplex in West Philly. So yeah, I just felt that whenever he chose this verse, I'm like, there's a reason. And it also stuck with me at that time a lot because, it was such a relief for me that I'm like, as a person that felt very obligated to society or humanitarian work, or especially to my family at that time, feeling so much obligation. Yeah, not because I had to or because we had a great relationship, but basically out of like guilt. And then whenever he read this, I was like, oh my God, just surrender to Mukunda. Everything's, all your obligations going to be taken care of. I don't have to feel, this like, am I doing the right thing? So this is 11 or 541. O king, one who has given up all material duties and has taken full shelter of the lotus feet of Mukunda, who offers shelter to all, is not indebted to the demigods, great sages, ordinary living beings, relatives, friends, mankind, or even one's forefathers who have passed away. Since all such classes of living entities are part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, one who has surrendered to the Lord's service has no need to serve such persons separately. Purport: one who is not fully surrendered to the devotional service of the Lord undoubtedly has many material duties to perform. Every ordinary conditioned soul is the recipient of innumerable benefits given by the demigods, who provide sun and moonshine, rain, wind, food, and ultimately one's own material body. In Bhagavad Gita, it is stated, Stena eva sa. One who does not reciprocate with the demigods by offering them sacrifice is Stena, a thief. Similarly, other living entities, such as cows, are providing us with innumerable delicious and nutritious foodstuffs. When we wake up in the morning, our mind is refreshed by the sweet singing of birds, and on a hot day, we enjoy the cool shade and breeze of the forest trees. We are accepting service from innumerable living entities, and we are obligated to repay them. Apta means one's own family members, to whom one is certainly obligated according to normal morality, and Nirnam means human society. Until one becomes a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one is certainly a product of his society. We receive mundane education, culture, tradition, and protection from the society in which we live, and thus we owe a great debt to society. Of course, our debt to society is not simply to the present order, but to all of our forefathers and ancestors who carefully preserved moral and social customs so that we, their descendants, could live peacefully. Therefore, the word Pitrinam, or forefathers, indicates our debt to previous generations. I'll just read one more paragraph. In fact, the members of the Krishna Consciousness Society are sometimes criticized by materialistic persons for giving too much attention to Krishna, rather than working to fulfill all of the above-mentioned obligations. In reply to this, the Bhagavatam 4:31-14 states, Yatatror mula nishechanena tripyanti tat skanda vujopushakaha. If one waters the root of a tree, automatically all of the branches, twigs, leaves, etc. are also nourished. There is no need for, nor any effectiveness in, separately pouring water on the branches, twigs, and leaves of a tree. The water has to be placed on the root. Similarly, prano pahara cha yatendriyana. Food must be placed in the stomach, from where it is automatically distributed to all the limbs of the body. It is foolish to try to nourish the whole body by rubbing food separately on all the bodily limbs. Similarly, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna is the source of all existence. Everything is emanating from Krishna, everything is maintained by Krishna, and at the end, everything will merge to rest in Krishna. The Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna is the supreme benefactor, friend, protector, and well-wisher of every living entity. And if he is satisfied, then automatically the whole world will become satisfied, just as all of the bodily limbs are strengthened and satisfied when food is duly remitted to the stomach. So, some thought that I had, this point that Prabhupada's making, that it's foolish to try to nourish the whole body by rubbing food separately on all the bodily limbs. So I was thinking about how, let's say at least in my case, I'm not saying that this applies to everybody, but for example, I had the experience that very vividly stuck with me of, yes, let me try to fulfill, I'm trying to practice bhakti, but let me try to just fulfill kind of the whims of my family members, this and that. And I would do it, or, some things. And it would, maybe there's that immediate satisfaction if you're lucky, but then it's give it a couple days or even a couple hours, even a couple minutes, and that the same dissatisfaction comes back where it's no, now I want this. No, now more. Now, so this is the nature of material gratification, is that, it's like rubbing food. The food looks very nice, but then you try to rub it and it's just okay, some sensation is happening, but it's not actually giving satisfaction. So if we want to be really compassionate to others, of course, and I'll read some lectures from Prabhupada, that doesn't mean neglect your family. That doesn't mean neglect the body. That doesn't mean, neglect your belongings that you're trying to use in Krishna's service. But there's a way to do these things expertly where one can maintain what one needs to, but at the same time not jeopardize their Krishna consciousness. So yeah, Prabhupada says it better than I do, so I'll just read from those lectures. They're amazing. But yeah, I just started to notice this more and more, that I'm okay, yes, I should give some attention to this person or that person, some past material relations. And once I do that, then they'll get off my case. Like they'll be satisfied and then I can just peacefully prosecute my Krishna consciousness. Now, sometimes maybe some of you have the experience that did work for you. In my personal case, it did not. It showed me very much that I'm just like, oh, okay, I give a little or I try to give something, and then it's just like at some point it's like it's just not enough. So, but whenever we, execute our Krishna consciousness, then actually, those people might feel some dissatisfaction in the immediate sense, but in the long term, whether they know it or not, that's to their ultimate benefit, even just by thinking of us. If we're, trying to practice bhakti, they get so much benefit. And then if one becomes, Prabhupada says, a pure devotee, that one liberates 14 generations of their family members. And then actually, Agari Krishna and I were discussing this. I'm looking at like Prabhupada's quotes about this, and it was like, what does liberation mean? And one devotee is asking Prabhupada this question, and Prabhupada says, liberation means like to become a devotee. So, for example, like in their next life, maybe they take a human body here, but they get that opportunity, to become a devotee, or they're born in a devotional family, something like that. So I found that point interesting. So yeah, basically the point is that, we do our best to not let our dharma, like obligations, get in the way of our Sanatana Dharma. So there's a way to, balance that. Like, for example, if you have kids and it's like, you're like, mom, we gotta go to school. And you're like, no, I gotta get my job. That's, they're depending on you. Like, you gotta take your kids to school. So it's not to be irresponsible, but the lifestyle that we're cultivating is meant to facilitate our Krishna consciousness in the long term. And it takes continuous guidance on how to do that, continuous adjusting, readjusting. It's like, oh, that's so exhausting. Well, that's relationships. That's how they work. Yeah, but my point is that sometimes, at least for myself, I create so many false obligations based on, what Prabhupada calls skin disease, that perhaps are actually jeopardizing or detracting from bhakti. That's also possible. So yeah, basically we should think of it as like a marathon and not a sprint. So what, obligations do I need to fulfill, either to the body, to my kin, to society, in order to, to the boss? Like obviously you can't just tell him, well, if you let me take the day off and read Bhagavatam, you'll be way more satisfied. But we have to think of it, how can we craft and cultivate our life to, be able to be in bhakti for the marathon instead of, just the sprint. So that means that we have to create a plan to gradually become more attached to Krishna, because like I said, the detachment and attachment have to be proportionate. So the detachment from material life has to be proportionate to the attachment to Krishna. Otherwise, it's Phalgu Vairagya. It's not super authentic. And it's like, but even like that though can be used in Krishna service. Like, Prabhupada was making so many sannyasis in their, 20s, even at 20 years old, like early in the movement. So I guess one could argue, well, was that right? If they like fell down after and this and that, the other. Anyway, Prabhupada's expert. He can seize any opportunity and use it. But my point is, we have to think of the longevity, what's going to be sustainable for us. So yeah, once we create this plan for our life, become more attached to Krishna, then all of this, we don't have to worry so much about like, oh my God, gotta detach. I'm in so much Maya. Why am I, why am I talking to my friend from high school, something like that? It's not like that. It's just like you can engage in those things, but you're not seeking to fulfill your heart by those things. So that's like, that's essentially the principle for whatever it is, like working or I mean, so many things. Anyway, I won't go into a whole long list, but that, you can do things as your duty and they might look material, quote unquote, or even like, let's say another example is taking care of your health. It's like, it's one thing to do it as, yes, it's an obligation, it's a duty, but it's another thing if you think, and I'm going to get so much satisfaction out of this. Like I'm going to, whenever I have a super fit body and I have, rock hard abs, then I'm going to be super satisfied, which is not true. I mean, yeah, it's not like even, people are like, yay, I got Ozempic and I lost a bunch of weight. And like, it's like, oh, are you happy? I'm so depressed. Like, it's an illusion. Um, So yeah, anyway, I already gave the example, just like I'm trying to add that in that this doesn't mean to act irresponsibly. I already gave Srila Prabhupada's example. It's just that we create a lifestyle where we can put Krishna or put giving Krishna to others more and more in the center, and gradually throughout the life depend on Krishna more and more. Prabhupada, for example, he was in the renounced order, he was preaching so heavily in the United States, or I mean, all over, but let's say America, for example. But he was a perfect gentleman. I mean, he wasn't, he'd greet people on his morning walks. It wasn't that he's like, oh, we're all avadutas. We're just like, we don't even have to worry anything about society. No, he said, one should be dressed nicely, like everything, right? We should be perfect gentlemen and ladies. But it's not like your heart is, yes, by being, by appearing a certain way to society or to the non-devotees, like I'm going to get so much respect and adoration and everything from that. Prabhupada's saying in this purport, actually, a lot of times devotees, what's it say? He says it we have no business creating enemies, but the process is such that non-devotees will always be inimical toward us. Even yesterday, we were on doing some book distribution, and yeah, like I had gone into the shop to ask because it started raining, so we go in and it's spawning. And I went into the bubble tea shop to ask these girls, like, can we move our table under here? And they're like, yeah, that's fine, that's all good. But then as soon as we moved it, and we're just like laughing and having such a good time, and just like, I don't know, probably just being a little bit too like free with it and not so reserved. I looked in the window and they're like whispering to each other, and you could see like they're like, should we call the manager? Like getting envious. And then I was like, listen, we can't even, if you get cash, like don't even think twice about, just like put it right into your pocket or bag, because as soon as usually it's like somebody will agree, yeah, you can set up in front of our shop or whatever, and then it's like as soon as they see you're getting money, it's like, ooh, the envy strikes, like, no, that's meant for me, that's meant for buy. Even if the people are on the way out the door, it's like, bro, they already spent the money, they've been to Patel Brothers, now they're coming out. But the envy is there. So it's always, even though maybe we're doing the highest welfare work, yeah, it will just naturally cause some tension, because that's the nature of the material world. Everybody thinks, no, that's meant for my gratification. So yeah, man, I had so many amazing things to read, but I took a bunch of screenshots, so I'm just like, oh yeah. So one example that I wanted to say just before I read these lectures is I was hearing a class by Devamrita Swami where he's talking about peacefulness, just for the individual, for society, and how in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna didn't want to fight, right? He's thinking, oh, in this way I'll be a peaceful man, or bring more peace. Why engage in this war? And then um, Krishna says, no, you should engage in this world. So the Amrita Raj was saying, like, oh, actually, Arjuna should have won the Nobel Peace Prize for fighting the war. Like, it's such like an ironic thing that actually Arjuna, by fighting, was doing the most peaceful act, which is just mind-boggling. oh yeah, I even wrote it down. So he said, what is spiritual peace? Does it mean to become inactive like a stone? No, spiritual peace means when you have no other desire except the desire to please Krishna. There cannot be peace if the part has a desire separate from the whole. Then there's disturbance. I wrote that down because I really liked it. Yeah, so this, and then I want to read, Prabhupada also spoke on this Arjuna Krishna relationship. So to become a very good man in this world, that does not mean that he is freed from this material contamination. He's contaminated by the goodness quality. Just like Arjuna, he wanted to be a very good man. Krishna said, now fight. He said, oh, how can I fight? Oh, they are my brothers. They are my grandfathers. No, no, better I shall beg. I don't want this kingdom. So this is material goodness. People appreciate very much. Oh, just see, Arjuna is giving up claim on the kingdom. But what Krishna replied? Krishna said, where from you got this foolish idea? Kutaste kashmalam idam vishame samapasitam anarya jishtam. This is for non-Aryans, not for Aryan. So this so-called goodness, so-called gentlemanliness, has no value in the spiritual world. That really struck me. No value in the spiritual world. Spiritual world, complete love of God without any attachment for this. So Arjuna, this goodness means attachment for his family. That's all. He was becoming a good man. Why? Because there's attachment for his family, for his grandfather, for his brother, nephews. So long there is attachment for this material world, either in the form of goodness or passion or ignorance. They're all the same. Yeah. And I think that's, oh yeah, and Prabhupada gave the example, I've heard this quoted, is like, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's saying that in the, basically saying in the material world, this duality of this is good and this is bad, whether in regards to anything and more, including morality, it's just a mental concoction. And like Prabhupada would say, he says the same example, the stool dried up is good and the wet stool not good. Stool is stool, that's all. For a devotee, this is stool. Either it may be dried up or moist. It doesn't matter. So those who are in ignorance and passion, they're little moist, and those who are in goodness, they're dried up. After all, it is stool. It's like, wow, that's clear. So, and then I'll read one other lecture. This one, I think is from a Ishopanishad lecture on verse 1 that he gave in LA. He said, therefore Krishna says, oh no, this is the same lecture, sorry. But that is where it's from, is LA Ishopanishad 1. Therefore Krishna says, Sarvadharman pratyagya mamekam sharanam vraja. There is no consideration of this goodness or badness. You have to give up all material attachment and abhorrence. Abhorrence is also another negative attachment. I don't like this. That means I have attachment for this. Don't like. You see? So a devotee is simply attached in the service of the Lord, and whatever condition comes, favorable or unfavorable, any circumstances, he is steady. Dridha vrata, bhajante mam dridha vrata. Dridha vrata means fixed up, without being tilting, tottering in any circumstances. So we should not have abhorrence or attachment. So anyway, I'll stop there. There's so many other nice lectures. This other one that I found is Prabhupada is quoting or kind of recounting Prahlad Maharaj's instructions that if we want to begin Krishna consciousness, then we have to begin immediately, because the more we grow older, our attachment for material things becomes more and more strong, and it's difficult. And then going through the system of varnashram dharma and how that helps to remedy that. So, but then Prabhupada makes, he's like, it's not a question of like, okay, householder or sannyasi or brahmachari like this and that. He's like, Prahlad Maharaj is literally a grihastha, and he's talking about these things. So yeah, it's not something that can be judged externally, because like I said, one could, let's say the example I was giving of Mulakarna, one could be like, oh, well, when she just was doing book distribution, that means she's super detached and renounced and elevated in Krishna consciousness. And then it's like, well, whenever she's working a job, then, oh, externally it looks like not so much. But actually the opposite is true. And there's so many examples, maybe somebody wanted to be they're like, yeah, I'll be a renunciate. And they're like cool with that. And then the spiritual master's like, no, actually, I want you to get married. Or no, actually, I think you should work. Or, so it's not something that can actually be judged externally. It's really just like, how attached am I to Krishna and how can I, augment that and increase that throughout the life. And then all of this, the detachment just comes naturally. So yeah, that was pretty much everything. And I am just trying to meditate on this thing that I said, that one way of thinking about that, Sarvadharma Parityagya, that just stop and drop the resistance, and then I'll take care of everything. So your detachment, your purification, your karma, everything like that. So I'll just stop there. Do you guys have some thoughts? You look deep in thought. I'm very here. Sorry. This, this, it's nice. Who said that? It's all about as a yeah, or you could just hold them both, flip it. This, I think. I can just follow this. Yeah, this is for here. Yeah. Hold them both. The questions was the which generation should deliberate is that which generation is yeah, I thought it was back and forth too. No. Oh, is it? Okay. I feel like I did read it, but I can't remember. Maybe somebody. You got the answer? Which direction is? I'm just kidding. Well, okay. Anyway, I feel like it is maybe 7 each way, but we could find that. Any quotes? Thank you. Oh, a graceful entrance. And one who has a sense of being a beautiful congregation. This is so crazy. Steve was just thinking of this, maybe he would have helped sleep. So I'm like, okay. So it's when you are finding yourself in obligation, whether it's like overt or subtle, and trying to remember, like you were, like you're not getting too caught up in it or attached to it or using it to fulfill your heart. How practically, like how do you remain in that thing on showing up with these material quote unquote obligation? That is such a nice question. Yeah, so immediate thought is that, yeah, like I said, we do have, oh man, we do have so many obligations, actually. Like, even if you think it's like, okay, well, I don't even talk to my family or my friends or this or that or the other, it's like, I mean, that you had maybe before becoming a devotee, like, even having relations among devotees, like to have any relationship, there has to be some obligation. Like, it's like you support each other, you might do things that you don't really want to do, or like I was saying, obligation to the body, or even obligation to clean your place, like take care of your things. So that's always there. It's just in order to, yeah, not, at least what worked for me, to not sink the heart so much into like, oh my God, if I just go, being in the ashram is so hard. If I just go spend a month with my family, there's going to be so much relief. And for like the first couple of days, maybe there is. But then beyond that, I'm like, oh my God. is that one gets a higher taste. So for me, that happened through, I mean, luckily through like book distribution, hearing and chanting with devotees, like steadiness and sadhana. And sadhana also gives, or reading also gives so much intelligence to see things clearly, like what is the dynamic actually happening here? And then that inspires detachment in the heart as well. So it's like you can, yeah, actually, my conversations and things like, for example, with my parents have gotten so much better actually because I can just remain more calm, like not get so agitated because you just, yeah, if you're not keeping Krishna in the center of your own life, it's so much easier to actually just get angry with everybody or annoyed with everybody or whatever like that. So in that, just in a very practical way too, it's like just by practicing this lifestyle, we just become better, like nicer to be around. Um, but I think overall, it's like I said, cultivating attachment for Krishna. So it could be anything. You could be attached to reading. You could be attached, especially your japa. But I think having the heart investment in service and also having some service that you feel responsible for, like, oh, that's like my baby, very much helps. Yeah, helps that. I don't know all the mechanics of why, or can't think of it off the top of my head, but does that help at all? Title. Sign language. Do you have one more thing? Okay, quick.
Um, when you were talking about, Prabhupada was talking about there cannot be peace where there's a such desire in the whole. I was thinking about the Srimad shadows, it's nice book where like studies it and it talks about like how even if everyone has separate interests, there cannot be peace, but if we all have interests of service to Krishna, peace. And also remember this verse, Susan from Gita, that one of the organizing the Supreme Krishna consciousness is having a transform floating towards the divine, that which there is no constant peace, having connected to the peace. And I was also just thinking about this greed of trying to give some satisfaction or attention to others, but it's never enough for them. And how one starts to be spiritually, and then you can actually see how when you try to serve the family member, like spiritual family members. On the spiritual level, they're like so much more satisfied than when you try to help them materially. And then these two questions about like time and attention, I'm probably not. It's like what is the impact of her like and what that mean? Is and you were kind of asked about Krishna, how we can plan for us. But then he was
Man, those were deep questions. Yeah, attachment to Krishna, that's my final answer, locked in for 500. And then the one before that, just being attached to the modes. I mean, the modes are so mixed, that it's just like, what was it? Say the question again?
yeah, because Prabhupada says something about attachment for the world in the mode of goodness, passion, ignorance.
Oh, yeah.
What does that mean? Passion, those different modes.
Well, okay, so he was making the point specifically, and I guess what I'll say about it is like, being attached to being morally correct. This is something that's always really struck me in bhakti is like, wow, bhakti is beyond just mundane morality. And so Prabhupada's making the point, that mundane morality, I mean, if you're lucky, it's like it's attachment to the mode of goodness. So yeah, devotees even go beyond that with the footnote. Prabhupada, did say we should be perfect gentlemen and ladies. And he demonstrated that as well. But yeah, it's really demonstrating, bhakti is beyond all these, ultimately beyond all these material considerations, which I just think is what, Arjuna's demonstrating it, like, the mundane morality mode of goodness is like, let's be peaceful, I'll go beg, like I don't want to fight this war. And Krishna's like, well, that's not the highest standard here. I want you to fight this and you will win the Nobel Peace Prize for that. So anyway, we can talk more after, it'd be like Mantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.